This podcast is brought to you by lineupmedia.fm.
Because if you can tell me what your habits are, I can tell you what sort of a person you are. I can tell you what your future looks like.
But like I always say, life is 10% what happens to you, it's 90% what you do about it.
The people who are most effective in the workplace believe that their future is going to be bigger than their past. When people don't believe that their future is going to be bigger than their past, they begin to disengage.
You're listening to The Circuit of Success, a podcast dedicated to helping you achieve success in every facet of life. Only on the lineupmedia.fm podcast network. Now, your host, Brett Gilliland.
Welcome to The Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today, I got to tell you, I'm really excited. I'm always excited, but today I'm excited. I read this book years ago, the author of this book, but I get to interview him today, Dr. Bill Danko. Bill, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Brett?
I'm doing well. It's good to have you on this show. We've got a lot of great people we've had and over the years, and just an honor to get to interview. So I read your book years ago. As you probably know, I've been in the financial world since I was 23 years old. So started in 2001. And so now here we are. I'm 43 years old, so 20 years later. And your book is a book that I've read early on in my career and have helped a lot of people with some of the stuff that you've brought. So
there's no mistake.
No mistake. The Millionaire Next Door. So I was going to get to that. So the Millionaire Next Door. Also the other book, Richer Than a Millionaire. There's that one right there. Just phenomenal books for those listening. You can get them on Amazon. We'll talk about all this stuff in the future here, Bill. But I always like to start every show with kind of what's the backstory, right? You don't just wake up and write these massively successful books and become a doctor and do all this, but what's helped you become the man you are today?
Yeah, boy, you talk about luck intervening on how things happen in life. I come from a pretty modest background. My father had a 10th grade education. My mom was a high school graduate. My dad died at the age of 38. I was 5 years old. And so with that, there weren't a lot of options in terms of schooling. And, I went to the state university because I could afford it. And that's where I met Tom Stanley in 1973. I took a course in consumer behavior. I got an A.
That's important.
Yeah. You know what? It really was because he liked my work ethic. And, he, of course, died 5 years ago in a car crash, unfortunately. But in that 1973, I assisted him with his very first study of the affluent market. And after a few years, he left that university, the State University of New York at Albany, to go teach at Georgia State University. But from 1973 to 1993, he and I did a number of academic papers together and a number of consulting studies together on wealth and who has money and who doesn't. So in that intervening 20-year period, the dean of my school of business, who is one of my mentors, Bill Holstein, who just died last year. Everybody I know is
starting to pass.
Yeah, right. Everybody I know is either dead or dying. So, but my point is, but Bill Holstein, saw some merit in what I was doing, and he gave me a 1-year contract to teach an introductory marketing course at the university after I got my MBA. And I told him, I said, gee, this is pretty good. Bill, what do I have to do to stay on? And he says, Danko, go get a PhD. Okay. So that's how that works.
Easy. Right.
Just go get a PhD. Yeah. So I applied to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, better known as an engineering school, but they also have the Lally School of Management. And so I completed my PhD by 1983, returned to the faculty at the State University of New York at Albany. And in 1993, this is where it gets to the nub of the book, Tom Stanley called me up and said, look, do you still have those old data sets? And of course I did. And he says, let's reanalyze it. Here's the concept. Let's look at people who have the illusion of wealth And the tentative title for the study was Big Hat, No Cattle, which became a sub-chapter.
Love that saying, yeah.
In the book. But there's a lot of pseudo wealth out there. Just because people have a big car and a big house doesn't mean they don't have a lot of debt.
That's right.
And coupled with that, geez, you look at the student debt load kids have nowadays. It's like having a mortgage, when you're 21, just getting out of school. So, but anyway, so that was the concept. So also in that meantime, I got married, had 3 kids, and so when he called me up about this massive project in 1993, I said, of course, in my oceans of free time, of course I can do this. Sure.
What else?
So the book was launched in 1996, and 4 million copies later, we can say it was a rich experience.
A very massive success. And it helped millions and millions of people way beyond the 4 million that you've sold.
It really has. It's in 40 languages, and it's provided worldwide opportunities for me. I think I've spoken in just about every single state of the union and a number of foreign countries, Taiwan, Canada, Australia, Poland, Germany, Switzerland. Switzerland, probably one of my favorites.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So you've made a career, obviously, in a personal brand about talking about personal wealth and wealth in America and all that. And what have you? And you talk about richer than a millionaire, a path to prosperity. So what is that path to prosperity? When you look at that and all the research you've done, what is that path?
Yeah, maybe this continues the backstory and why that book is necessary. When Millionaire Next Door was launched in 1996, again, I was still on the faculty of the university. In 1 year, I had more than 70 out-of-town speaking engagements. I didn't miss one class, but boy, there were some hellacious travel schedules to get back. And
a very understanding wife.
And kids too.
And children, that's right.
Yeah. Well, in fact, my daughter, my oldest, she has her PhD and she's on the faculty of a college. And I said, Christy, why in the world would you put yourself through this? And she said, Dad, I saw you do it. I can do it. So the kids are watching.
They watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm proud of all 3 of the kids. They're all gainfully employed. But anyway.
That's good.
Yeah, right. They don't ask me for money. I give them money, but they don't ask.
That's right. That's right.
It's all good. It's all good. But in 1996, when the book came out and this whirlwind of excitement and doing my other academic research, my mother had a major stroke and couldn't care anymore for my quadriplegic brother. So what do? You say, family is important. So I vowed to keep my brother Tony, who the Richer Than a Millionaire is dedicated to, out of a nursing home. Bought him a home, paid for his aides, and and every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I was the personal aide because it's hard to get a weekend aide. And here I am, a New York Times bestseller, bon vivant, PhD. And you know what? Here I am dealing with a guy who can't even touch his nose. And, I have everything, but he had a lot of faith. And that's very important. And that's how Richer Than a Millionaire came out. There was an essay from 1758 by Benjamin Franklin under the pseudonym it was called The Way to Wealth. His pseudonym was Richard Saunders, as in Poor Richard's Almanac. And if you do a Google on The Way to Wealth, you'll find the 3,500-word essay readily available. But here's the key thing. He says, being industrious and frugal and prudent are all wonderful things, but it's all blasted without a blessing from heaven. And we have this obligation to not only admit that we are just humble beings, but also to be charitable to others. And, now it's interesting with Benjamin Franklin, he belonged to 2 parishes in Philadelphia. And I think it was more for marketing purposes, for his printing business, working the crowd.
Didn't know everybody in town.
Yeah, exactly. He was the ultimate networker. Okay. So, but with that said, my background of saying, I got to help my brother. My mother could no longer do it. My brother also died 5 years ago. he was good until he wasn't. I mean, it's kept him out of the nursing home as I pledged. So did my wife help not too. It was my deal to deal with this.
That's right.
And, I used to drive a Mercedes and traded that in to buy a wheelchair van. I got the best parking spots.
Right up front.
That's right. Okay. So this idea of we're just passing through, we have an obligation to family, reflecting on Benjamin Franklin's work about being humble and understanding that there's no such thing as really a self-made man. It's really by grace and luck we're able to do the things we do. And I had this familial obligation, which I fulfilled, and I do it again. There's no question. Yeah. And but right now, I'm no longer under house arrest, so I can do a lot of things on my own terms now. Okay, so that's how the book came about in terms of just reflecting on the life of somebody who just got a bad hand to play.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've been doing the financial thing for 20 years, like I said, and own an independent investment firm called Visionary Wealth Advisors. And I think the thing that we talk about is your health and your wealth. You can have all the money in the world, but if you have no health, then it's for what, right? And the same thing, you can have all the health in the world, take care of yourself, eat your vegetables, right? Exercise, do all the things you got to do, but you don't plan on your money and you spend it all versus saving. And then it's for what, right? And so those two things are parallel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Richer Than a Millionaire, we have this 2x2 matrix of it, and essentially, but it goes this way. Are you satisfied with life or dissatisfied with life? We have this psychometric scale from the psychology literature called subjective well-being, SWB. It's valid and reliable, created by Professor Ed Diener about, 1980 something. But there's a footnote in the book that references.
Tell us.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, he put it into the public sector because, he's used this scale on an international basis to look at the psychological health of countries and how happy are you. And we also look at near millionaires, those between $100,000 and $1 million, and those over $1 million in net worth. Now, why 100,000 as a break point? Well, right now, the median net worth in the United States is about $120,000 per household. When we did the survey 5 years ago, it was about 100,000. So we excluded half the population because, look, if you're struggling, there's all sorts of things going on in your life. But if you have, between 100,000 and $1 million, you're likely to get to that upper 10% actually to be a millionaire. To be in the top 10%, you need, I think, about $1.2 million right now. Mm-hmm. So not even $1 million cuts it to the top 10%.
Right. Well, I think, what is it? The income, I think I've read before, like around 212,000, pushing the top 1% of income earners in America, and over $100,000, I think you're in the top 95%.
Yeah, right. It's amazing. And you say, well, gee, how can you live in Manhattan?
Right.
And you can't really. You can't. But Manhattan's a different story altogether, and St. Louis is a different story, and upstate New York is a different story. And so the way Richer Than a Millionaire came about was, again, based on Franklin, based on life experience, of saying we're just passing through and saying, well, what are the characteristics of those people who are really satisfied with life? And what we find, as Franklin said, be charitable. Yes, indeed. Those who are satisfied tend to be givers of time and money. Those who are satisfied tend to be practicing the golden rule. Those who are satisfied, there's a good correlate here. They're not anxious about the future. I mean, look, everybody's concerned, but there are some people who just are crippled by the prospects of what's going on in our world right now. But if you have a certain, positive attitude and a faith, you can get through this.
That's right.
There's a lot of crummy stuff out there.
Yeah, and I think, again, doing this for a long time, I've seen people with lots and lots of money that aren't happy. And I've seen people with very little money that are happy. Yeah,
right. When people ask me, okay, well, give me the 10-second overview of what the book is about, Richer Than a Millionaire, I said, look, being rich is good, but being rich and happy is better.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
The next best thing is being modestly wealthy and happy.
What's it? Denzel Washington, I think they said. He said, "Money can't buy happiness, but it's a good down payment." So to the point is, it's not everything.
Yeah.
Certainly helps.
And certainly there's the literature, especially with lottery winners, if you were irresponsible before winning the lottery, you're just going to be irresponsible with a lot of money.
Right. Yeah.
after you won it.
Yeah. One of the best things I saw about that was a guy named Jesse Itzler. In one of his books, he's got Living with the Seal and Living with the Monk. But he talked about if you were a good person before you had money and now you have money, you're an even better person. Right. And if you were a bad person before you had money, you're an even worse person. Yeah. And I agree with that.
Yeah. You're familiar with FIRE, financial independence, retire early. When I left the university, people said, well, what do you mean you're too young to retire? I said, I'm not retiring. I'm refocusing.
That's right. And recalibrating.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe the acronym, financial independence is good, but refocus, I don't know what that would spell.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. And we talk about that with our clients is not that you have to quit, but you want to be able to walk in with the keys, right? And be able to turn the keys in because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's a choice.
Yeah, doing things and that's really the basis in the Millionaire Next Door as well. The whole idea is, what do I have to do to become financially independent, right? Did your screen freeze? Can you see me? Oh no. Brett, where are you? Can you hear me?
You there?
I'm here.
All right, I'm here too. So we'll there we go. We're good.
Did I freeze or just you freeze?
Yeah, no, I don't know what just happened. But we're good. We're good.
It's Verizon.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about is financial independence is I always say is it's being able to do what you want when you want without the fear of money.
Yeah.
That's truly financial independence.
Absolutely. And and it's a great feeling, and it gives you the opportunity to be super charitable as well. Yeah. It makes it even better.
So you've mentioned Benjamin Franklin a few times, and I read a book years ago. I think it was called The Founding Fathers or something like that. And it talked about in that book that it's 3 times harder to keep your wealth than it is to build your wealth. So when you hear that, what do you think about that? You agree with that? Disagree with that?
Yeah, well, I don't know about that proportion, but I can say this, a fool and his money are soon parted. That's one thing. But I know Franklin writes about the idea of, moving from town to town for your occupation is the equivalent of having a fire in your house. You got to rebuild, in the next town. So there's a lot to be said about having some stability. Right. Again, I didn't have to move very far in upstate New York. Went to school here. We have, an airport such as it is. The point is, I was able to get everywhere just by being here. Yep. And now that we have Zoom in our life, my goodness.
Can be all over the world in seconds. So when the Millionaire Next Door came out in 1996, what have you seen change from 96 to 2020? Obviously a lot, but what have you seen change the most when it comes to personal finance?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that really concerns me is that student debt load. Some believe that going to a prestigious, expensive school is somehow a ticket to ride.
Right.
One of the things we cite in Richer Than a Millionaire is, a couple of studies. One is about the class of 1985 from Harvard Law School. This was an article that was written in 1995, where students from Harvard Law said, we thought this degree was going to be our ticket to ride. All we had to do was say, we're Harvard.
Right.
And they find that you actually have to produce.
Amazing.
And a second one from the economics literature looked at the difference between what is the real factor that is going to explain a student's future earnings? Is it the school or is it the personal motivation of the student? Well, it's the personal motivation.
That's
right. And so one of the things, and a greater societal issue is, over these last 20 years, we've become more dependent on government. We have less personal responsibility. We've gotten to moral relativism. Well, who's to say? We have all these politically correct caveats of what you can and cannot do. Everybody's walking on eggshells. Yeah, it's making it more difficult. Getting a decay in society. This is why I like being in the Adirondack Mountains so much, because nobody bothers me. And it's COVID free for the most part, and but boy, it really concerns me when I think about my kids and my grandkids. What are they growing into?
Right.
What do we?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that your point of that work ethic, and you mentioned it really early on too, is that your co-author, Mr. Stanley, had his thoughts as well as your work ethic is why he called you, I believe, right? And so, I think that's one of those things you can learn. A lot of people talk about, can you teach it? Are you born with it? Which one is it? Where do you fall in that situation? Are you born with it? Can you teach it? And if you can teach it, how so?
Again, when I look at, I'm pretty familiar with Western Pennsylvania and coal mining country, and regular folks there. And you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers as an example, and they say, look, we could have a life of hard work in the mines, or we can get into pro athletics. So given the choice of, let me be motivated to achieve something greater. I don't want to do what the my parents and grandparents did. And in my case, I mean, my goodness, my first funeral was my father's. And I guess I've been thinking about mortality forever and saying, look, got to make the best of it. So
that's right.
You can't get a home run unless you get up to bat, right? You got to keep swinging here, man. And not everything works, but some stuff does. And
I think to that point, using that analogy of baseball, you also know you can be a Hall of Famer and get out 7 out of 10 times.
Exactly. Yeah. In the marketing literature, I guess Professor Phil Kotler in his marketing management book, is where I learned about it, called, the expected monetary value of a client. You hear about, okay, this client could have $1 million sale that I might get, but there's a lot of these clients, and most of the time when I contact them, they're going to say, no, I'm not ready. But the point is, one of these times they will say, okay, let's do it.
I'm ready. That's right.
And so even though you make 100 calls to make $1 million, you have to say to yourself, every time I make a call, I just made $10,000.
That's right. Break it down in bite-sized pieces.
That's right. Because my goodness, being told 99 out of 100 times, no, can really have some deleterious effects on your ego.
That it can. So talk about this net worth chart you have. It's the net worth chart versus happiness. Talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. In Richer Than a Millionaire, we have this 5 statements people refer to or respond to on a 7-point scale. And so if you score low on all of them, you get a score of 5. If you score high on all of them, you get a score of 35. 20 is the break point. We find that about 80% of the millionaires are pretty well adjusted. They score above 20. But then, just as we did in the Millionaire Next Door, where we do the contrast and compare between prodigious accumulators of wealth and under-accumulators of wealth, we have these mutually exclusive groups, and we can look at what are the behavioral characteristics of those who are happy with money versus those who are disgruntled with money. I mean, what's the sense of being a miserable millionaire?
Right.
I mean, oh my God, you got it all, man. And, there's some highlights. I hope I can find it quickly here, but there's one, this Carol Hochberg. I've never met this woman, but anyway, it's in here. It's an obituary I read in the New York Times. Carol Hochberg, who died of breast cancer, I consider to be richer than a millionaire because she said, I know, she was in the financial planning business, and she says, I know there's more to life than making rich people richer. And then
that's a great point.
And then the guy who founded Victoria's Secret, he committed suicide. He was not richer than, that's also highlighted in the book. His ex-wife said, he always had this thirst to achieve more, but he really didn't have to do it. And he felt like a failure because he could not replicate it. So he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and end of story, right? But then you
found on this chart that as long as they're above 20 in this example, then the happier they are. And what are some of those characteristics?
Yeah. Well, again, they tend to be charitable, importantly. They tend to be engaged with a greater number of people. Now, look, in the psychology literature, when you just look at the happiness issue, this is true. The well-adjusted person in our community generally is, married once, has children, has aspirations for the children and grandchildren. Part of the community will volunteer, in the old line things like Rotary and Kiwanis. They'll be engaged in their church or their synagogue. These tend to be the happy people in the society. About 20 years ago, a sociologist from Harvard, Robert Putnam, wrote a book called Bowling Alone. And it's really quite a serious, I lent my book to somebody and I can't find it. It used to be on my bookshelf here. But
I have a rule, no loaning books.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Go buy it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay. But Robert Putnam makes the point. We have a deterioration of this social fabric, and it's not good. There are fewer joiners, and maybe there's a greater sense of unhappiness in a general sense in our society. But those who do understand what it means to be engaged tend to be the happy ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
think you're right. I mean, to your point, charitable, right? Part of the community, part of your church, synagogue, whatever it may be. I mean, and those are things that you and I know and our listeners know, but I think it's important for us, even myself, to slow down and think about that stuff.
Yeah. Well,
and the gratitude behind all that.
Yeah, exactly. There is gratitude. In fact, when we look at the great religions, in Judaism, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, there's the passage about give your coat to those who have no clothes, feed the hungry. And in Matthew 25 in Christianity, I mean, this is what drove Mother Teresa, that which you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. We really have to help others in society. And in Islam, one of the 5 pillars of Islam is almsgiving, being charitable to others. I can't think of any great religion that does not include this as something that's good for you.
That's great.
Good for you to be charitable. And even Benjamin Franklin, without saying it specifically in terms of a religious sense, he says it's really essential to be engaged with your fellow man and woman in your society to help those, because there's always going to be somebody who needs help.
Oh, 100%. What I think too is the feel good for them, but also the feel good that you have personally.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and some people ask, well, on my survey research, is this cause to effect or effect to cause? When you're doing static research, you say, okay, these people say they're happy on this scale and they're also charitable. Well, there's a good association there, and I can't prove cause and effect, but I can show you that, well, the great religions say you got to do this and it's for your betterment, for society's betterment. So when we look at the disgruntled, there's this dentist, I call him Dr. Payne in the book. He says, I hate my wife, I hate my kids, I hate my practice. I have a lot of money and I'm going to spend everything by the time I take my last breath.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are.
That's the opposite of who you want to be.
Yeah. There are some pretty, maybe they have psychological issues too. I don't know. I mean, there's something that's going on if you hate your kids and you hate your wife, and
Very sad.
There's one guy, I call him, Job. He has the spirit of Job. All this crummy stuff happens to him, but he never loses faith. And and he scores pretty well on the satisfaction scale. One of my Roman Catholic priest friends helped me with a pretest of the questionnaire. And he said, Bill, you got to put this question on there. Are you at peace with your soul? I said, And I did. And just answering that yes or no, I'm at peace or not at peace, and correlating it with that psychological construct of subjective well-being, it's almost a perfect fit. Those who have that internal, I know I'm at peace, are also those who tend to be scoring high on the happiness scale. I mean, so there's, one of the things that I think made Millionaire Next Door so successful was that we had convergent validity. We had 20 years of studies. We had focus groups, personal interviews, IRS data, census data, our own questionnaires. And all these various data sources converged on the basic truths that we find in Millionaire Next Door. And in a similar way, even though Richer Than a Millionaire is only a few years old, I think it has those same qualities. I mean, people are telling me that, there are too many things. It's the religion, the psychology, the attitude. In fact, there's even a Greek term called metanoia, metanoia, which means a true conversion of heart. And I find this in the military literature when Douglas MacArthur reconvened his troops after World War I in a speech. I have it here someplace in my stack. But he says, we're all struggling to prevent war. And it can't be done with politicians. It's not done with generals. It has to be done with a true conversion of the heart to say war is not the answer. And this is the general who helped us in World War I, World War II, and Korea. And he was really a great leader. But he knew that the answer was not more atomic bombs and bigger bullets, right, although we need those. Unfortunately, we need it. He says it's really something that comes, this metanoia, this true change of heart to get this understanding that's going to create a more satisfied life. This is exactly what President Eisenhower in the 1950s talked about. Being the great general, he feared that we're going to be caught up in this in military industrial complex, and we are. Right now, one of my sons works for Lockheed Martin, so I want him to keep his job. But my point is, it's in Lockheed Martin, it's doing very well in the stock market. That's for sure. Right. And right now, until we have that true societal change of heart and people really have this understanding, we're going to need those weapons.
That's right. That's right. So I get asked this a lot. I'm sure with your background here, you get asked this a lot as well. But people will say, Brett, when will I know enough is enough? Or what is the number? Right? Yeah. You ever get asked that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this is something, in fact, part of my discussion with my former dean, Bill Holstein, we were talking about this, and I had some data analysis questions and I wanted to get his perspective. And there's a chart in the book. Oh boy, I think I sent it to you, didn't I? I may.
Oh yeah, you actually did.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Okay, it's on page 26. But my point is there for your viewers there. But I'll explain what's going on here. Okay. It's a curvilinear chart. When we ask people, all right, what's your current net worth? And then a follow-up question, how much do you think you need in order to feel rich? How do you know you have enough? Okay, so if you have 500,000 in actuality to feel rich, people have told us on average they need 5 times that amount, or $2.5 million. Those who have 2.5 million to feel rich, they say they need twice as much, or 5 million. Those who have 5 million say they need 8 million. Now look, here's the reality. As I said, the median net worth in the United States is about $100,000. To be in the top 10%, you need about $1.2 million. To be in the top 5%, $3 million. To be in the top 1%, right now, $11 million is the minimum threshold, is the threshold to get you into that top 1%. Now, you see, we hear about the celebrities and, Musk and Oprah and Bill Gates. I mean, people who are in the stratosphere in terms of net worth. Right. Obviously they achieved it, but how much is enough? Well, when you look at that graph and you see where it starts, the inflection point on a downward basis, that's about the $5 million mark.
Okay.
If you're at $5 million, man, you're doing way okay.
Yeah.
You really
are. Just fine.
Yeah, because when you look at the bottom part of the net worth distribution, under 100,000, my gosh, there's a segment down there that has a negative net worth, and they are hurting.
I think the key to that is too, not to get into the personal financial side of things, and certainly not for us, but I mean, talking to that listener, I mean, it's you hear so many people say, "Oh, I'll just save 10%." Well, that's easy to do, they say, right? Well, it's not easy to do, but number one. Number two, I don't think 10% savings is enough. No. We talk to our clients all the time with 20% of your savings needs to be done minimally, because we're working for X amount of time, but we're actually living longer, right? People used to retire and they'd retire for 5 or 10 years. They were dead and money didn't need to last that long, right? And so they still stuck with 10%, but it's not that. Because now we're retiring and people are living for 25, 30, 40 years past retirement.
Yep. In fact, in my empirical studies, we show that 22% is typically what the wealth builders are saving.
That's right.
You know, I've had the opportunity to talk to some athletes. In fact, you know what? One of my agents, maybe you actually get this, Insurance Newsnet. Do you get this?
No.
Well, okay. Mike Talblub, this Hall of Fame, he goes, Bill, you're in here. It's about, athletes saying, gee, I want to be wealthy. And so in the locker room, they threw him a copy of Millionaire Next Door.
Nice.
Read this.
Read this, buddy.
Yeah,
Real
right.
quick on that. I used to be the speaker when the St. Louis Rams were in town. I got to go and I was the financial guy that would speak to the St. Louis Rams preseason.
Yeah.
Right. They would do their camps, right? And I would come in and talk finances, and I'd put $1 million on this big whiteboard, right? And they're all in there, all the big players, Sam Bradford of the world, they were all in there. And I would say $1 million, and I'd say, pay your agent, pay your taxes. Here's what's left. And people are just astounded. These athletes were astounded at the fact that that's all they had left, right? And I think, again, it goes back to education, that we don't truly understand if somebody makes 100,000 or $1 million or 10 million a year, what the ramifications are when you're paying taxes. And I know our listeners all know that stuff, but you got to save a large percentage of that to be successful long term.
Yeah, you're right on. When I've spoken with some high earners, especially athletes, whoops, he's still there?
Yep. My phone call came in. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Good picture, though. Good still picture.
That's right.
Okay. I say, look at as terms of thirds. 1/3 is taxes and administration, 1/3 is spendable, and 1/3 is long-term investment. And that's a pretty easy way of cutting it up.
That's right. That's exactly right.
One of the key themes in Millionaire Next Door, of course, is this self-imposed economic scarcity, where you say, look, it's up to me. We have all these societal influences saying, well, look at these beautiful people driving these new cars. Look at these people in these big houses. They must be really doing well.
Right.
And what you have to do is get it through your own head, saying, well, wait a minute, this is what I want to accomplish, and don't let my income dictate my lifestyle and have it expand like that. Set your goal of saying, I will save consistently that 20% or 22%. I will avoid excessive debt. My gosh, you look at the leverage problem in the housing market. Whatever happened to the time when you could put 20% down, then get a mortgage? Now it's, you don't need anything down, or 5% down.
Yeah, giving it to you.
You need skin in the game, don't you?
Absolutely. Skin in the game is a big deal. I'm a big believer in that.
And Benjamin Franklin, again, 250 years ago, said, the borrower is a slave to the lender. And that sounded familiar to me. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 7, you'll find 2,500 years ago, the borrower is a slave to the lender. Man, when you're in debt, you're in bondage. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think too, is that, with doing what I do for a living, I mean, you got people that come in and want to talk about, they also want to enjoy it. Right. So I personally don't have a problem with having a nice home. If you want to drive a nicer car, that's fine. But you also got to save money. That's the key. Right. And I know you just said that, and I know that's so simple, but that's the key. That's right. You can have this nice thing, but make sure you're saving the money over here.
Yeah, there was something like in MS Money, whatever. But a majority of households can't even come up with $400 for an emergency.
Wow.
There's something like that. There was something in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was last year, that the title of the article was, it was kind of silly, but it makes a good point. Why Warren Buffett doesn't get a haircut. And I said, well, gee, maybe I thought this meant he's going to lose money on bonds or something, but no, he says, look, if I spend $50 on a haircut and I do that every month, all that, when you look at the future value of that money, that's $300,000 by the time I'm 100. Something like that. But it's these little things, when you say, do I really need that $5,000 wristwatch or a $50 Timex? And do I really need that Mercedes? I drive a Subaru now, and I'll tell you, I need it.
That's right. You need it in the snow. That's right. That's right.
That's right. Especially in the Adirondacks. That's right. You know, there's so many good lessons in the certainly Millionaire Next Door, but also in terms of Richer, that goes beyond saying, man, when you realize you're just passing through, come on, be charitable because there's a lot of people in need.
And I think you find that out over time, don't you think? I mean, when you're in your 20s and you want to start a career and you're like, oh, I think I can do this and make a lot of money. And it's really not much more than that, to a lot of people. But then I think as you get older and wiser, you're starting to say, okay, hey, the money's great, but let's make an impact here.
That's right. Yeah. In terms of scholarships and just supporting your universities and hospitals and churches and synagogues, it just it's the right thing to do. There's no question.
So I know you get your website, richerthanamillionaire.com. So check that out, richerthanamillionaire.com. What do you hope people get from that?
Well, we have a series of articles that we've written with my colleague Rich Van Ness. He's about 10 years older than I, and when I was in the thick of it dealing with my brother, and I said, oh, look, Rich, I'm going to put all this stuff on the back burner. Now, this guy's a Marine by training. He goes, no, we got a mission here. We will get this done or die trying.
That's right.
That's right. So we got it done. And, perseverance is really its own reward in this sense, Yep. But he lives around 15 miles north of me, and so it was easy for us to get together, talk about these ideas about what do we want, the legacy we want to leave our children and our grandchildren. I have 3 kids, 5 grandkids. He has 3 kids and 3 grandkids, and we each have 1 wife.
It's good.
There's a neurosurgeon I interviewed in Florida. He was worth $20 million. And he says, but you know what? In one afternoon after a divorce, with a stroke of a pen, it was $10 million.
Yeah.
So, and another good thing about this neurosurgeon, he said, I was doing all these complicated cases. He's a very skilled individual. And he says, but I'd find myself getting sued because it wasn't as good as people thought it should be. So he got rid of the discretionary practice and became an emergency room neurosurgeon, saying, look, I saved you. Okay. This is the best we could do.
It's all perspective.
It's all perspective. He still makes money, but boy, it's, you learn a lot just by interviewing people and saying, wow,
you really do.
They went through this and the nastiness of a divorce. In fact, one of the things, we point out in Richer Than a Millionaire, having a stable household is really worth it in every way. Stephen King, the very prolific, fiction writer, but he has a book called On Writing, a nonfiction book, and what his process is. And in that book, he says, look, there's no way I would have been as productive and prolific as I am if I did not have a stable spouse by my side.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I did a study at one point of all of our financial advisors and just kind of went through from upbringing to sports to spouse to you name it. And that was a big one. That was a really, really big one I found. And just in our industry, the most successful, the ones that have the most supportive households, period.
Yeah. One of my friends in the construction industry who makes a lot of money, and he's on his second wife, and I like her. She's a trophy wife. But at one time he said, man, the way she spends, I wish I had my first wife back.
I trade her back again.
But, so be happy with what you got, right?
That's right. I'm very blessed. Very, very blessed.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Bill Danko, where can our listeners find more of you? I know we just said richerthanamillionaire.com. We can go get the books at Amazon. Anywhere else?
Yeah. You can get it at a bookstore, but man, with this pandemic thing, it's hard to get into a bookstore.
That's right.
They can order it, and some people do. A number of colleges and universities have made it required reading, both books, for their students, like in a personal finance course. So even some university bookstores
wow, that's
have
great.
it available. And so they buy in bulk. And I got to tell you, again, my colleague and I, for Richer Than a Millionaire, we said, we're both educators. I've personally taught more than 10,000 students in the university, and he has a similar amount. And so that's a lot of one-on-one stuff in a 15-week semester, getting to know these students. And one of the things that is so obnoxious in education is not only tuition, but also the cost of textbooks. The paperback, and we made it paperback, it's $7.99,
Right.
The Kindle version is, I think, $3.99. Yeah, $3.99. Yeah. And so we've been over a Polish version.
Can't be richer than a millionaire or be the millionaire next door if you're spending $35 on a book, right?
Well, yeah, times 10 courses a year and
right.
$35. I'll tell you, there are some books that cost $200 a copy. And now, how old are your kids? I sense them probably pretty young, not in college.
Yeah, 15. So a freshman in high school, 7th grade, 5th grade, and 1st grade.
Yeah, and so you got some in 3 years. Say, what's $100,000 a year for tuition?
Right. Yeah. What the heck? Right.
It's some no-name school.
Yeah.
But boy. Yeah. So look. Also, and one other point here is, get them when they're young. I'm involved with junior achievement in this greater upstate New York area, at least tangentially involved. I've spoken with some students and some management there, but their mission is to get this idea of good stewardship and proper use of money into junior highs classes and high school classes. And if we can do that, I think we'll all be better off as a society.
Yeah.
Because, man, when I look at the curriculums that some students have, they have no idea about anything about money in long-term anything.
No, I teach a course. Well, when I say teach a course, let me rephrase that. I guest speak. I'm the professor of the day 2 times a year at Southern Illinois University here in our area. And that's the whole thing, is teaching these kids about financial 101 and what people don't know. And it's a shame. You hope they can start to pick up more of that, like you said, junior high, high school, and into college. And,
and having parents emphasize it in the home. And,
right.
But what do we have now? We have a broken society in many ways. There was a story in our local paper in one of our inner city schools. There's more than 100 kids during this pandemic who are just missing in action. They don't even show up for the Zoom calls.
Right.
They just,
very sad.
They're just, and there's nobody at home to tell them you must do it. Yeah, we have some significant challenges to deal with.
And so our listeners you can get you on LinkedIn. I know that's where you and I connected.
Yeah. LinkedIn. I don't like LinkedIn. Yeah. Look me up.
LinkedIn's a spot. You can find him under Dr. Bill Danko. And Bill, it's been awesome having you. Really appreciate you being on the Circuit of Success and sharing all your wealth of your wisdom you've got over the years.
This is great. I'm glad we made this work, and I want to say Merry Christmas.
Hey, Merry Christmas right back at you. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Okay, Brett. Be well.
You do the same.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next week for another episode of The Circuit of Success with Brett Gilliland on the lineupmedia.fm podcast network. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and through our website, circuitofsuccess.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and email any questions to info@circuitofsuccess.com.
This podcast was a presentation of lineupmedia.fm.